We're here tonight with Beth B, director of Lydia Lunch, The War Is Never Over, which those of you in the audience tonight will be seeing very shortly. And Beth agreed to meet with me to chat a little bit about the film and give a bit of an introduction before we screen it. I was looking at Hallwalls' timeline, and Lydia Lunch goes back quite a ways with Hallwalls. I mean, she brought retrovirus to Hallwalls in 2014, but her first appearance at Hallwalls was in November of 1979, and she actually delivered a lecture entitled Music Theory.
Great.
I don't
awesome.
I don't know that we have a recording of that, but it's on there. And then a couple items down in March of 1983, we screened Vortex, your 16 millimeter film that included among many performers Lydia Lunch.
Right.
So you've known Lydia for decades now, and I wanted to begin by asking you the thing that probably doesn't come out or isn't a consideration when you're directing documentary. Can you tell us about the first time you met Lydia?
I can. I'm sure that there are going to be many pieces that I'm missing, but what my memory is that I had been hearing about this band, Teenage Jesus and the Jerks. I was like, okay, I got to see this band. Because at that time, living in New York City, everybody lived, below 14th Street. Everybody kind of knew each other from the streets. And, if there was a band playing, it would start to percolate. Everybody would hear, oh, yeah, got to go see that band, got to go see that band. So I think it was at Max's, Kansas City, and I went there not knowing what to expect, and it was scream from the bowels. It was like real and short, sharp. The edge was razor sharp. Her voice, the music, the instrumentation, everything. And I think it was all of maybe 15 minutes long. In those days, it was like, you were going to hear someone play on stage. It was like usually an hour. And this was so, it was concept. And for me also, in terms of what my films have always been about, it's the content. And you lash it out there at the audience and then you walk away. So I've gotten more mature, perhaps, I think, through the years. I try to seduce my audiences a little bit more, but it was really slam them in the face, let them fall. And I really felt there was so much impact in her presence, this presentation of female that I had not seen anywhere, because it was really inhabiting and owning her sexuality in a way that was kind of beyond feminism, at least the feminism of that time. And I was just about to make the film Black Box, looking for someone who could torture a young, innocent boy. Okay, there she is. She's on stage. There she is, and cast her in Black Box. And a great line that she has in that film is, and this part was not scripted, the film was scripted, but she added in a line, "Shut up and suffer." And she says it in this, this voice of Lydia's like, "Shut up and suffer," and I was just like, oh my God. So that was kind of my introduction to Lydia, and we've worked on and off with each other over the years. And it's usually like she writes something, or I see a performance, or we talk about something, and I feel very inspired. And our subject matters have always kind of been threaded and woven in and out through the years. It's really like voicing the unheard and seeing the unseen, which to me is most important, speaking for those who cannot speak for themselves. And so, in some ways, that's why we've kind of, continued a relationship in that way, working together through the years, through 40 years? I think about 40 years.
Now, it must have been at some point earlier than the origin of this current film that knowing Lydia, watching her work through the years, her performances, her recordings, her spoken word, there must have been a point early at some point where you said, this woman would make an interesting subject for a film.
Actually, I no, I really had not thought about that.
So then where did that surprises me for one thing, but then where did it originate, the idea for the documentary?
I think, a lot of, I think it had more to do with my trajectory as a filmmaker. I, started making sort of experimental films that then became more hybrid, working with, experimental documentary, fact and fiction, then into narrative. And then I actually went into television for about 9 years, directing documentaries, crime documentaries for network television. And it was a phenomenal experience for me to really be able to hone my craft working in television. Of course, after a number of years, I started to really feel pinched by, all the, the limitations within that realm. And I said, I've got to get back to the underground. And that's where my film Exposed came out of that. I went back to the underground in New York City, and I found these phenomenal performance artists who were using burlesque as a vehicle to talk about really tough subjects. A lot of them were very autobiographical to the people that I filmed. So, Exposed came out of that. Then I did a documentary about my mother, Ida Applebrug, phenomenal.
Which we screened and was
Yes,
fantastic.
Exactly. And then after that film, I kind of felt like there was a lot of discussion about women, where is feminism today? And, the history and the Me Too and all this stuff. And I also, have taught art and film for many years. And I felt like a lot of the young people just did not know about the history and how important it was to look back at my history, Lydia's history, a lot of the women of that time and the music of that time, cinema of that time, and to really understand that so much of what came out of the Me Too movement, that goes back to the caves. It's historical. And what is hysterical is historical. And so people sometimes say to me, oh, you're so hysterical. Why are you getting so upset about this? I'm like, because it's historical. And Lydia, I realized Lydia's message and what she has talked about for these 40 years, people think that Oprah, Jerry Springer, this one or that. It's like a no. Lydia has been talking about excavation of emotions, trauma, disturbance for so many years. And so in a way, I wanted to echo that and to come in a full circle with my past, Lydia's past, with looking at things from that kind of a perspective. So that's why people say, well, why didn't you focus more on Lydia's music? And to me, her music is one vehicle. Her spoken word, a lot of people actually have said to me, oh, I didn't even know about her spoken word, or I didn't know about this. I didn't know about her poetry. I'm like, oh my God, so important. So it was really to try to weave together all, weave together these elements, the creative, but also giving some groundwork, a foundation for where a lot of these things come from. So bringing in her own personal trauma, her own personal disturbance, and having that inform the kind of creative work that she's done and the music and such.
Yeah, I saw her in Toronto when I lived in Toronto in the mid to late 80s, spoken word performances, I think a couple times. And you know, they were tremendous because I don't think I'd ever felt assaulted, you know, by a performance before. That was very striking to me. It's never kind of left me. Um, but now, following along what you just said, Lydia's personal trauma, I want to be careful about how I ask this. I want to ask this obliquely because I don't want to give away the
Yes, please,
opening to
please
the
do.
film.
Yes,
And
okay.
so then you could answer it very generally. But
Mhm.
there is an opening to the film which was unexpected in terms of what it is. Very simple, simple
Mhm.
story,
Mhm.
very short, uncomplicated,
Mhm.
very concise, and yet kind of amazing at how it blossoms
Yes.
into every theme about her, into sexuality, into violence, into um, subjugation, into trauma, maybe as a weapon. You
Mhm.
know, it was. So I don't want to really talk about the specifics of that opening, but it was, earlier you used the term slap in the face, and I thought that was a great opening, like a real slap in the face.
Yes, for me, the opening of a film is the most critical and the end of the film. How do you want to introduce the audience, your character to the audience, or your subject matter to the audience? And then at the end, what do you want to leave them with? How are they going to leave the theater? What are they going to be thinking about? And a lot of people often say to me with my films and my artwork, and because I do large scale installations and single channel videos, all sorts of things, and they say, why are you trying to provoke the audience? You're being so provocative, and it's shocking. And I'm like, you know what? I want to provoke thought. I want to trigger things so that people can ask themselves questions. People can be introspective and walk out of the theater, not with answers, because there are no solutions, but I want them to walk out to discuss, to think, to meditate on the material that they are seeing and hearing. And so the beginning of a film is just critically important to me because it's the setup. It's the setup by which people can then go, okay, wait a minute, wait, whoa. This is not going to be just, here's a fun ride we're going to go on. This is a complex piece of psychology that we are all going to dig through together. And the way that I weave these things through the film, it's like there's a hit and then a little bit of a massage and then there's a bit of a seduction, and then I echo it with things that I want to help the audience to really dig deeper. And that's really why the beginning is so important. And it's absolutely about power and control and sexuality and all those things, the complexities. I also think that people see Lydia Lunch in terms of black and white, good and evil, all those things that people evaluate other people that they do not really know. And Lydia has a presence and an image that she projects. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring in the shadows and the gradations of color that reside within her. Because there are sides of her that people don't see. And her humor is so contagious and arresting. And her compassion. And those are sides that I think in some ways, maybe she doesn't want to, she's on a stage. So I think performers, by virtue of being on a stage, we endow them with certain things because they're an icon. They're in some ways on a pedestal. And it's my way of making movies to kind of take that, to take that person and look at them more as a human being.
Well, I was struck, in 2014 when she arrived with the band. It was my first time meeting her, and I was struck by just how kind and sweet and compassionate she was. I don't want to make that sound like I was expecting something else. Uh, but she struck me as someone with bottomless wells of empathy. And I was thinking about that, and I don't know how else, unless you're a sociopath, I don't know how else you would deal with some of the subject matter that she deals with without being very empathetic, deeply so, and really concerned about people. I mean, after the concert, she spoke to this young man that had come from Rochester, from her hometown, who had known someone that she knew, and she talked to him for like at least an hour or more after the show. You know, it was just so warm and giving to him. So that was kind of wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful to meet your heroes, and then they're kind of great in a real way.
Well, and that's the humanity.
Now, in doing this kind of film, you make a bucket list of talking heads, of people you want to interview about your subject. And I'm wondering, did you get to talk with most of the people on your list? Were there people that maybe didn't want to talk or weren't available? Or, I mean, I think someone like Roland S. Howard, unfortunately passed away years ago, would have been a wonderful
He would have been
person to hear from.
wonderful. Yeah, he would have been wonderful. I mean, the way that I try to approach my films is to really not go with the names or the characters that are sort of most easily readily associated with that person. So there are some that I felt were critically important, you know, like Thurston Moore, okay, or, you know, Richard Kern, critically important because of the films and the sort of certain revelations in regards to Lydia's sexuality versus her, you know, growing up period of sexuality. You know, those things I think are contrasted and work so importantly in the film. I wanted obviously to interview Richard, and Richard's a close friend, and so having Richard in the film seemed essential. But then I really want to, there were some people who said no. You know, Lydia, as we all, you know, I mean, do, there's some people who did not want to speak to the documentary. But I also wanted to bring in people who were younger, who had a different viewpoint in regards to Lydia. So Danita Sparks, who is in a way a different generation, but yet a fierce, phenomenal singer and performer. And she was important, as was Nicholas Jarre, who again, very bizarre, the way he came upon Lydia's music. And you'll hear more about that in the movie. It's very surprising. But that gives us more insight into the kind of power that her message has, that it is influencing generations after. And that was very important to me, to bring in that younger generation. So I really chose people who give you know, different viewpoints on the time period, on Lydia, on their experiences, you know, some very personal, others more historical, because I think that it makes a larger picture. You know, it's a different lens. Each person, I feel, has a different lens with which they are viewing Lydia. So I wanted to have as diverse kind of a lineage there as possible.
Now, we're living through the Me Too era, and it's striking to me that as historical as that moment is and continues to be, as I previewed your film, it was hard not to think, wow, Lydia is still like way ahead of the curve. in terms of her thinking, in terms of what she's saying. It's like the times have yet to catch up with her.
Yeah, well, that's why it was funny, because there is this one performance in the film, and I'm sure there will be some people who will be like, and upset by it. I thought it was critically important to have that performance in the film, because it speaks to what you're saying in regards to looking at, again, I talk about the gray areas. And I think that the Me Too movement was critically important, but what I feel was missing, there were so many voices in between the extremes and the situations that were being described. And it's a larger conversation than what was being had. And so I think that including that in the film was a critical matter. And my hope is that people can absorb it, they can respond and think, as opposed to just react. And that's always what I hope, if something's being triggered, a reaction, I think it's important to just be introspective and go, okay, why? What is the message behind this? So that's all I'll say about that. But I have to leave in about 4 minutes.
Okay.
Or 6 minutes, 6 minutes. Okay.
I'm wondering a couple of things concurrently. First, how did Lydia, I mean, she participated in the film, so obviously she was fine with it, but I wonder what her first reaction was to your idea of it. And concurrent with that, a film like this, when you have a documentary made about yourself, it's a little like when you're getting a Life Achievement Award, but you're still performing, like the story is not over. And I'm wondering if, as you made this film, did you think, you know what, in 10 years, I might have to make part 2 of this film?
That's what Lydia keeps saying. Okay, Beth, we have to do part 2. For me, when I proposed this to Lydia, she said, so many people have asked me. So many people have asked to do a documentary, Lydia, I want to do a documentary. And she said, no. She said, you're the only person who could make this documentary. And I think part of it has to do with, she knows me for so long, we know each other. I don't ever judge the people who I'm doing my film about. I don't necessarily agree with everything everybody is saying, or the paintings they're doing, or the performances they're doing. That's not my job. It's not my job to judge. My job is to be as truthful as I can and to bring as much insight into the person, into the subject. And I think Lydia understood that. I also believe that in terms of the way I approach the film, it's about themes. The themes that Lydia has approached through her career, through her life thus far. And I think that those will probably be many of the same themes she continues to focus on through her life. And so in some ways, I think that the documentary is in a way a lifetime. I think that it will, 10 years ago, if you look at this film, perhaps she will have done many other things, but many of the themes will be very relatable. So I think it's kind of as they say in television, it is evergreen.
So you're not committing to part 2 just yet?
I think a lot more time will need to go by.
Well, listen, thank you again so much for taking some time out of your evening.
And I love Buffalo, Hallwalls. I mean, I started, I think, in Buffalo with Tony Conrad so many years ago. He brought my first films there, and I've had this very loving relationship with Buffalo and Hallwalls and the community. So you know, hopefully that will continue. And thank you so much for having me, and enjoy the movie, everybody.